When I first moved into the apartment, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. It was in a decent part of town, close to work, and the rent was manageable. The building wasn't fancy. Chipped paint in the hallways, faint smells of old food wafting up the stairwell. But for someone in their mid-20s trying to stay afloat, it was perfect. I had a one-bedroom unit with a small balcony and just enough space to call my own. For the first few months, I barely noticed the neighbors. And honestly, that was fine with me. The man across the hall, though, was hard not to notice. He wasn't loud or disruptive, nothing like that, but he was strange. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, always wearing the same clothes, a plain button-up shirt tucked into dark slacks, no matter the time of day or weather. His hair was thin and combed flat against his head, giving him a vaguely uncomfortable, dated appearance. At first, our interactions were the kind you'd expect from people sharing the same hallway. A quick nod, an awkward smile. Sometimes I'd pass him as I was heading to work in the morning or coming back with groceries, and he'd give me this blank stare, like he wasn't quite sure how to respond. I figured he was just shy or socially awkward, so I didn't think much of it. The first real red flag came one evening in late fall. I had just come home from a long shift at work, arms full of groceries, and was fumbling with my keys when I noticed him standing in his doorway. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, watching me. Hey, I said, trying to make light of the situation. He didn't respond. No smile, no nod. Just stared at me with an unsettling intensity. I managed to get my door open, and as I stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were still on me. Even after I shut the door, I felt a lingering unease, like his presence was etched into the air around me. I chalked it up to a long day at work and tried to forget about it. But after that, I started noticing him more often. It wasn't just that he was around. He always seemed to be there at the exact moments I left or returned home. I'd grab my bag in the morning, and there he'd be, standing in the hallway, pretending to lock or unlock his door. I'd come back from errands, and I'd catch him peeking through his peephole as I walked by. It escalated slowly, so subtly that I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of knocking. It was soft at first. 3 light taps, spaced just enough apart to make me question if I'd imagined it. I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, holding my breath. Another knock, louder this time. I grabbed my phone and crept to the door, peering through the peephole. It was him. He was just standing there, staring straight ahead, not moving. He wasn't knocking anymore, just standing perfectly still, his hands at his sides. My heart was pounding. I didn't know what to do. Should I call out to him? Ignore him? Call the cops? My brain felt like it was racing a mile a minute, trying to calculate the safest move. Finally, I found my voice. "What do you want?" I said, my tone firmer than I expected. No response. He didn't move. "Hello?" I tried again. Still nothing. I waited, gripping the doorknob tightly, as if that would do anything if he tried to get in. After what felt like hours, he turned and walked back to his apartment. I heard his door click shut, and then there was silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every sound, from the faint hum of the refrigerator to the creak of the floorboards, made my skin crawl. The next morning, I debated whether to report it to the building manager. But what would I say? My neighbor knocked on my door? It wasn't exactly a crime. Maybe he'd had too much to drink, or maybe he was sleepwalking. I tried to brush it off as a one-time incident, but deep down I knew it wasn't. A week later, I came home to find a note taped to my door. It was written in neat, blocky handwriting. "Why won't you talk to me?" I froze, the key halfway to the lock. My stomach dropped, and I scanned the hallway, half expecting him to be standing there. but the hallway was empty, eerily quiet. I ripped the note off the door and went inside, slamming it shut behind me. My hands were shaking as I locked the door and slid the chain into place. How had he known when to leave the note? Was he watching me come and go? Did he stand there, waiting for the right moment? That night, I shoved a chair under the doorknob and pushed my dresser against the window. I slept with my phone clutched in my hand, ready to dial 911 at the first sign of trouble. The breaking point came 2 nights later. It was late, close to midnight, and I was on the couch, half asleep with the TV on. I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, stopping right outside my door. I muted the TV, every muscle in my body tensing as I listened. There was a faint scraping sound, like metal against wood. My heart was in my throat as I crept to the peephole. He was there again. But this time he wasn't empty-handed. He was holding a knife. The blade glinted faintly in the dim hallway light as he ran it gently along the edge of my door frame. He wasn't trying to break in, not yet. But it felt like he was testing me, seeing how far he could push. I stumbled back, grabbing my phone and dialing 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the device to my ear. "There's a man outside my apartment," I whispered to the dispatcher. "He has a knife." The operator told me to stay calm and lock myself in a room. I barricaded myself in the bathroom, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I could still hear him pacing in the hallway, the blade scraping softly against the wood. The sirens couldn't come fast enough. I heard the distant wail of police cars approaching, and then nothing. No footsteps, no scraping. Just silence. When the officers arrived, he was gone. They found the knife on the floor outside my door, but there was no sign of him anywhere in the building. The apartment across the hall was empty, completely bare, as if no one had lived there in months. I moved out the next day. I didn't care about breaking the lease or losing my deposit. I just wanted to get as far away as possible. Even now, in a new city, in a new apartment, I can't shake the paranoia. Every time I hear footsteps in the hallway or a knock at the door, I freeze. And every time I close my eyes, I see him standing there, staring, the knife glinting in his hand. And I wonder, did I escape? Or is he still watching me, waiting for the right moment to try again? When I first moved into the building, I thought I'd found the perfect place. It was small and unassuming, tucked into a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a handful of convenience stores within walking distance. The kind of place where no one asked too many questions, which was exactly what I wanted. The rent was low, the walls weren't too thin, and the neighbors, at first glance, seemed friendly enough. One night, a couple of weeks after I moved in, I woke up to the sound of knocking. It wasn't frantic or loud, just a steady, deliberate tap on my apartment door. At first I thought I'd imagined it. I lay there in the dark, waiting, my heart pounding in my ears. When the knocking came again, louder this time, I got out of bed and crept to the door. Through the peephole, I saw her. She was standing barefoot in the hallway, staring straight ahead, her arms hanging limply at her sides. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to do. Open the door? Ignore her? Finally, I called out, "Can I help you?" She didn't answer right away, just stood there for a long moment before muttering, "I need help." Her voice was flat, almost robotic, and something about the way she said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "What kind of help?" I asked cautiously. She didn't respond, and after another pause, she turned and shuffled back toward her apartment. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening as her door clicked shut. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe she'd had too much to drink or wasn't feeling well. But the unease stayed with me long after I went back to bed. The next day, I saw her sitting on the landing like always, her hair hanging in greasy strands around her face. I thought about asking her if she was okay, but the memory of her standing outside my door in the middle of the night stopped me. Instead, I nodded awkwardly and hurried past. That night it happened again. The same steady, deliberate knock. This time it was louder, more insistent. I shot out of bed, my chest tightening as I tiptoed to the door. Through the peephole I saw her again, but this time her expression was different. Angry. Her lips were pressed into a tight line, and her eyes seemed darker, more sunken than before. "Let me in," she said, her voice sharper now, more demanding. My hands shook as I pressed my back against the door. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need help," she said again, but there was no emotion in her voice, no urgency. I didn't respond. I stayed perfectly still until I heard her footsteps retreating down the hall. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the peephole again, she was gone. The next morning, I found something outside my door. A small, cracked hand mirror propped up against the base of the frame. I stared at it for a long time before finally picking it up and setting it aside, unsure what to do. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Over the next few days, I started finding more things. A single muddy shoe, a half-burned candle, a note with nothing written on it but a faint smeared red line. Each time I'd glance up at the landing outside 3B, and each time I'd see her watching me from the shadows, her head tilted slightly to one side. The breaking point came late one night. I'd just fallen asleep when I woke to the sound of footsteps in my apartment. At first I thought I was dreaming, but the sound was too real. Slow, deliberate steps, moving across the floor in the living room. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, clutching it like a weapon as I crept toward the noise. When I reached the living room, it was empty. The windows were shut. The door was still locked, and nothing seemed out of place. But the air felt wrong, heavy, oppressive, like the room itself was holding its breath. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. The next morning, there was another note taped to my door. It wasn't written this time, just a single red handprint smeared across the paper. It was small, like a child's. My hands shook as I tore it down, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it into the trash. That afternoon, I went to the building manager and told him everything. The knocking, the notes, the things left at my door. He gave me a skeptical look, but eventually agreed to check in on her. When he came back, he shrugged and said she wasn't home. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. But later that night, as I was taking out the trash, I found her waiting for me at the top of the stairs. "You shouldn't have ignored me," she said, her voice low and raspy. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. "You think you're safe?" she interrupted, taking a step closer. Her eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, almost black. "But you're not. Not here, not anywhere." I bolted past her, slamming my apartment door behind me and locking it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely slide the chain into place. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor, clutching a kitchen knife and staring at the door, waiting for it to open. That was the last night I stayed in that building. The next morning, I packed a bag, broke my lease, and left. I didn't care about the deposit or the inconvenience. I just needed to get out. I never found out what her deal was. The landlord claimed she moved out a few weeks after I did, but I didn't stick around long enough to find out where she went. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that she wasn't just trying to scare me, that she wanted me to leave for a reason. And every time I hear a knock at the door, I wonder if she found me again. When I bought my house, I thought I'd finally found the perfect place to settle down. It was a modest little home, nothing extravagant, but the neighborhood was quiet and well kept. Every house had neatly trimmed lawns, freshly painted shutters, and flower beds brimming with color. It was the kind of street where people waved at each other as they walked their dogs or pushed strollers, and the biggest excitement was the occasional delivery truck pulling up to drop off a package, except for the house next door. From the moment I moved in, it stood out. The lawn was wild, overgrown with dandelions and tall grass. The blinds in the windows were always drawn tight, and the driveway was home to a rusting car that hadn't moved in what looked like years. At first, I thought it was abandoned, but as I unpacked my boxes on that first afternoon, I realized someone did live there. It was the man. I spotted him while I was carrying a box up the porch stairs. He was standing just inside the front window, barely visible behind the heavy blinds, watching me. His face was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes were dark and sunken. He didn't move, didn't wave or smile, just stood there, his gaze fixed on me like I was some kind of curiosity he couldn't quite figure out. For a moment I froze. Should I wave? Ignore him? Before I could decide, the blinds fell shut with a sharp snap, and he disappeared into the house. I told myself it was nothing. Some people are just private, I thought. Maybe he didn't like strangers. Or maybe he was shy. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. But the longer I lived there, the more I started noticing things. At first, it was little things you could dismiss if you weren't paying attention. Late at night, I'd hear faint noises coming from the house next door. Not the normal sounds of someone living their life. No muffled TV, no footsteps, no music. It was something else. There were these dull, repetitive thuds, like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like tapping or scraping against the walls, but it was so faint I wasn't sure if it was real or just my imagination. Then there were the lights. Every other house on the street had curtains or blinds, but you could still see the glow of lights from inside during the evening. His house was different. At night, it was always dark, except for this faint flickering light that came from one of the upstairs windows. It wasn't a steady glow, like a lamp or a TV. It pulsed, erratic and uneven, almost like candlelight. I tried not to think too much about it. People have their quirks, I told myself. Maybe he just liked living in the dark. But it was hard to ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I stepped outside, I had this strange sense of being watched. I'd glance up at his house, and there he'd be, standing at the window, hidden just enough behind the blinds that you couldn't quite make out his features. I started making a point to wave when I saw him. At first, it was just a polite gesture, the kind of thing you do to break the tension. But after the third or fourth time, he didn't respond, just stood there, staring. It started to feel off. The first truly strange thing happened about 2 weeks after I moved in. It was a Sunday morning, and I was outside trimming the bushes along the fence that separated our properties. I'd barely gotten started when I noticed something sticking out of the grass near the base of the fence. It was a small, dirty, stuffed animal, a teddy bear, its fur matted and gray with age. I bent down to pick it up, turning it over in my hands. It looked like it had been out there for years, abandoned and forgotten. But as I examined it more closely, I noticed something odd. The bear's stomach had been slit open, and the stuffing was spilling out. Inside, tucked into the cavity, was a folded piece of paper. I hesitated for a moment, glancing toward the house next door. The blinds were closed, as always, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. Curiosity got the better of me. I unfolded the paper, my fingers trembling slightly. In shaky, uneven handwriting, the note read, "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you?" My stomach dropped as I read the note. The words stared back at me. Simple, but chilling. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. The bear dangling from one hand, and the note crumpled in the other. I scanned the yard, half expecting someone to be there, but everything was still. Silent. Too silent. Even the birds, which usually chirped endlessly in the morning, seemed to have gone quiet. I glanced at his house. The blinds were still closed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was there, just beyond the glass, watching me. I tossed the bear and the note into the trash, trying to brush it off as some weird coincidence. Maybe it wasn't even from him. Maybe it was left there by some neighborhood kid, or maybe it had been there for years, and I was just overthinking it. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Things got worse after that. The sounds coming from his house became more frequent. Sometimes it was the scraping noise, long and deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. Other times it was a sharp rhythmic tapping that seemed to echo through the night. And then there were the footsteps. Late one night I was sitting on my couch, scrolling aimlessly through my phone when I heard it. A slow, deliberate creaking coming from the fence outside. I froze, straining to listen. The sound wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Someone was walking along the side of the house. I turned off the lights, my heart pounding as I moved toward the window. The yard was bathed in the dim glow of the street lamp, and at first, I didn't see anything. But then, near the corner of the fence, I caught a glimpse of movement. A figure was standing there, half hidden in the shadows. It was him. He wasn't doing anything, just standing perfectly still, his face turned toward my house. I couldn't see his features clearly, but I knew it was him. I backed away from the window, my hands trembling. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? That my neighbor was standing in his own yard. It wasn't illegal, but it wasn't normal either. I stayed up all night, sitting on the floor with my back against the couch, clutching a kitchen knife. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I found something waiting for me on my porch. It was a single, rusted key, tied to a piece of frayed red string. I stared at it for a long time, my mind racing. Was it his way of sending a message? A warning? Or was it an invitation? I didn't touch it. I grabbed a paper towel, scooped it up, and threw it in the trash. But as I walked back inside, I noticed something else. Something that made my blood run cold. The blinds in his upstairs window were open. For the first time since I'd moved in, the window was uncovered, and I could see directly into his house. There was no furniture, no curtains, just a bare, empty room with peeling wallpaper and a single chair sitting in the center. And on the chair was a stuffed animal. Not just any stuffed animal, it was the same bear I'd found near the fence. I slammed the door and locked it, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely turn the bolt. For the next few days, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. I buried myself in work, stayed out of the house as much as possible, and avoided looking toward his property. But the unease lingered, always at the back of my mind. Every time I came home, I half expected to find something new waiting for me on my porch. And then, one night, I heard it again. The footsteps. This time, they weren't outside. They were inside. I had just gotten into bed when I heard the first creak. It was faint, but distinct. The sound of weight pressing down on a floorboard. My body tensed, and I held my breath, listening. The sound came again, louder this time, closer. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, the narrow beam slicing through the darkness of my bedroom. Slowly, I crept out of bed, the light shaking in my trembling hand as I scanned the room. Nothing. The house was silent again. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, or maybe a neighbor's noise carrying through the walls. I crawled back into bed, but I didn't turn off the flashlight. And then, at 3 a.m., there was a knock at the door. It wasn't frantic or loud, just 3 slow, deliberate taps. My heart was in my throat as I sat up, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The knock came again, heavier this time. I forced myself to get up and crept to the door, careful not to make a sound. Peering through the peephole, I froze. It was him. He was standing on my porch, dressed in the same plain sweatshirt and jeans he always wore. In his hands, he held something, a small, dirty box wrapped in what looked like plastic. His head was tilted slightly, as if he was listening for something. "Go away!" I shouted, my voice cracking. He didn't move. "I'm calling the police!" I yelled, fumbling with my phone. As soon as the words left my mouth, he smiled, a slow, unsettling grin that stretched too far across his pale face. He placed the box on the porch, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I waited until I was sure he was gone before opening the door. The box sat there, silent and unassuming. I didn't want to open it. Every fiber of my being told me to throw it away, to leave it untouched. But curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a pair of gloves, picked it up, and carried it inside. It was surprisingly light, and the plastic wrapping was tightly sealed. I cut it open with a pair of scissors, my hands trembling as I peeled back the layers. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of my house, taken from somewhere across the street. In the photo, I was standing on the porch, smiling and holding my phone, completely unaware that someone had been watching me. I called the police that night. When they arrived, I told them everything. The noises, the stuffed bear, the key, the photograph. They checked his house, but he was gone. The officer who searched the property said it looked like no one had lived there for months. The house was empty, the furniture stripped out, and the only thing left behind was a chair in the upstairs room, sitting in the center of the floor. I moved out the following week. Even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. Every time I hear a creak in the floorboards or see something out of place, my mind goes back to him. His blank stare, his slow, deliberate movements. And every time I find a package on my doorstep, I wonder if this will be the day he comes back.